Masechet Baba Batra Daf Kof Samech Tet. Beforehand, we saw a case where someone has a document, but it's all erased, and so he can go to a court and say, "Look, I have this document, and the witnesses, their names are erased, but you can see, some of the remaining text." And so he wants to renew the document. So we said, "Yes, you can do that, as long as you find witnesses that can testify about whatever the document is about, and then they can write a new one and say this person had a document and it was erased, and the document said this and that, and then the witnesses that come and testify, they could sign on this new document, and that's the way you can renew a document that was erased." Now we're going to talk about a document that's lost. Can you make a new one? Tenora banan. Haresh sheba ve'amar, avad shetar chovi, af al pi she'amru adim, anu katabnu, ve'chatamnu, ve'natanenu lo, en kotbin lo et hashetar. Our Baraita teaches that someone comes and says, "I lost my promissory note. This guy, I lent him $1,000, and he gave me a note that said he owes me $1,000, but I lost it." And he comes to the Bet Din and he says, "Can you write a new one for me?" Even though he has witnesses, and the witnesses say, "Yes, we were there. We wrote the original document. We signed the original document, and we gave it to the lender." It's not enough if they just said they wrote it and they signed it, because we saw before, you can write and sign a document and give it to the borrower to hold on, so that the borrower eventually, let's say later in the day, he's going to borrow money, and then the borrower will give it to the lender. But it doesn't mean that actually happened, right? He might just write up a document just in case. He's hoping that he'll get the loan. So if the witnesses didn't actually see that the lender received the document, then certainly they cannot testify. But now they did. They wrote it, they signed it, and they gave it to the lender. So they know for sure that this loan really happened. Nevertheless, we do not write a new loan document. There's a big problem if you do, because what if he then finds the original loan document? Now he's going to have two documents. Each of them say, "You owe me $1,000. He'll be able to go and collect twice. Or maybe he's even hiding the first document, and now he goes and has a new one written, and then he'll go and collect twice. So therefore, we do not allow such a replacement document. This is different from the erased one. See, the erased one, we have it. We see it right here. And the problem is the witnesses are erased. Okay, so then we can say, "Listen, this one is erased, so we're giving you a replacement." That's no problem, because he won't be able to produce the erased one. The erased one won't work in court because there's no witnesses on it. So you don't have to worry that he's going to collect twice there. But here, we're giving him another one. Now he might have two totally legal-looking documents, even though it's really just about the same loan. That is only true that you don't write a new document if it's a loan document. But for something about buying and selling, there you do. If someone has a document that says, "I bought this field from you," so this is a proof that this is my field because I bought it. And then they come and say, "Oh, I lost my deed." So then, if we have witnesses that were there and they said, "Yes, we saw this guy, we wrote the original deed, we signed it, we gave it to him," then you can write a new document based on that. Now, why don't you worry here also that you can use this document. See, a deed is not only proof that this house is yours, it can also be used to recollect, just in case if there's a guarantee. Usually, when you buy land, there's a guarantee that just in case someone else has a prior lien on the land and it's repossessed by that creditor, so the buyer can then come to the seller and say, "Hey, you have to pay me back or give me another piece of land instead of that." So now, why don't you worry that if you give a person two deeds, then they'll be able to recollect. If someone takes it away, they'll be able to get repaid twice. So we solve that problem by saying, "Chutz min ha'acharayut shebo." When you write the new one, the replacement deed, then you leave out the part that says that there's a guarantee. See, because sometimes you buy something with a guarantee or without a guarantee, and whatever you write in the document. And so even if the original document said, "Here, I'm selling this to you and I guarantee the sale. If this land is repossessed, I'll pay you back or provide you with another piece of land." that has a guarantee. If he loses the document and now you come to write a new one, then in the new one, the witnesses saw, they were there. So we know that this sale happened and this land belongs to the buyer, but they leave out the part of the guarantee. That way, he will not be able to repossess the land twice, because even if he finds or was hiding the original deed, he can only use that to repossess. The new one doesn't have a guarantee clause, so he won't be able to repossess money or a field twice for the one that he's buying. That is all Tanakama. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Af shitre mikach umimkad, and kotvin. Rashbag says no. Even for a buying of land, you don't write a replacement document. We'll talk more about Rashbag. Vechen haya Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, hanoten matana lechavero vehechzir lo et hashetar, chazera matanato. V'chamim omri matanato kayemet. So, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel also said, and the second statement will help us explain the first statement, that if someone gives a gift to a friend and he gives it with a shtar, he gives him a document, and the document says, I'm giving you a gift of this house. I'm gifting you a house. And then if the recipient of the gift returns the deed, then the gift returns also. According to Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the shetar itself is closely connected with the land. It's not just a means of giving the gift over, but it's actually connected to the land. See, Chachamim say that even if he gives back the document, still the gift remains. So according to Chachamim, giving a document of a gift is just a means of transfer. That's it. And once it's transferred, that's it. It's yours. It belongs to the receiver. And even if he loses that deed or gives it back, that doesn't matter. The gift remains in the hands of the recipient. But not so for Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. He thinks that whoever has the deed has the land. And therefore, if I give you a gift and then you give it back to me, then it's not yours anymore. It goes back to the giver. That can help us explain why Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says we don't write another deed also for a sale. Why? Because let's say I sell you a piece of land, and so now I give you the deed, I give you the document, and let's say you change your mind, and now, right, I get the money back, and you give me the deed back. So it could be that we reneged on the sale. Fine. So now I have the deed back. Now there are witnesses that saw the original sale. They didn't see that you gave it back to me. So those witnesses may very well come and they could testify again that they saw, that they wrote, that they signed, and that they delivered this deed of sale. So they won't know that it was returned. So this is what we're worried about. Maybe I gave you a deed of sale and then you returned it. We canceled the sale. But then you'll go and claim that you lost it, that the sale went through and you lost it, and you'll have the witnesses write another one. And this replacement, then you'll be able to say, oh, look, this is my land, and take the land, even though actually you gave it back to me, and the sale was never a good sale. So therefore, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says we have to worry about that, and that's why you don't write two deeds. However, according to Chachamim, the deed is just a means of transfer, and therefore, if once I transfer the deed and I give it to you, giving it back isn't going to reverse the sale. Or to reverse the sale, you'd have to do another sale, and then you would give back a different deed, which then I would have that said, oh, even though I sold it to you on Monday, you sold it back to me on Tuesday. And therefore, even if you had another deed that said Monday, it would not be a problem according to Chachamim. So that helps us explain the difference between Chachamim and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. All right, now we're going to analyze the Braita further. Amar Mor, chutz me'acharayut shebo, mai ta'ama. So he said that you cannot write a new loan document, but you can write a new deed. This is according to Tanakama. However, in the second deed, you are not going to put a guarantee clause. Now, what's the reason for it? Amar of Safra. So we are explaining the reason, basically, that if you have two deeds, then you can go and collect if that document is if that land is repossessed by some creditor, then the buyer will be able to repossess twice from the seller, right? The buyer has a right to go and tell the seller, you sold me land, but that was taken away. It was repossessed by a creditor, and then he can go and extract money or land from the seller. If he has two deeds, he can do it twice. But the details of how he's going to do that are more complicated, because if you just do it twice at the same time, one right after the other, then it's kind of going to be obvious that when you just did this yesterday, you came and you took land from someone. So we have to figure out exactly what this scheme would happen. Amar Rav Safra, lefi she'en kotvin shetarot al sadeh achat, dilma, azel baal chob tarif lehai להי, והזל היי ומפק חד וטריף לקוחות, ואמר לבעל חוב, שוף לי דאקום בה והדר תה תרפן, ומפיק אחרינה והדר הזל tarif lakochot acharine. The Rav Safra says we have a general rule that we do not write two documents of sale on one field. Why? Because perhaps a Baal Chob, a creditor, will repossess it. So we have a seller and a buyer. The seller owns this piece of land, and he sells it to a buyer. Good. And he sells it with a guarantee. Good. And he has a document. Now, let's say he'd write two documents because he says he lost it, and now the buyer has two documents of sale that are identical. If that seller should have a creditor, he owes money to someone, and he doesn't have any money, he doesn't have any cash, he doesn't have any land himself. So that creditor can go after land that was sold after that loan. And so this buyer's land has a lien on it. So now the creditor will go and collect the land. Okay, and so mapika chad vetarif lakochot. And then the buyer will go and he will repossess land that the seller had owned and sold, right? Because he has a guarantee. And so if there was any land that the seller owned at the time of that first purchase, he owned land, even if the seller sells that land afterwards, buyer number one can go and say, I was a prior buyer, and therefore I have a lien on the land that you bought after me. So we have a chain of events, right? The creditor can repossess the land that the first buyer bought, and now the first buyer can go to a later buyer and repossess that land. So now he goes and does that. So far, so good. All that was kosher. But here's where the problem is. The buyer and the creditor will collude. And the buyer will say, listen, creditor, you just repossessed my land, the one that I bought originally. Let me stay on the land for some time until everybody forgets about this. And remain quiet for a while. And then people will now not remember that you repossessed it. They'll think I own it. And then sometime later, 3-4 years later, you should come and repossess my land again. And then I will take the second deed and go to other people that bought land from the seller and say, hey, look, now my land was repossessed and I have a lien on your land because my sale was prior to yours. And then he'll be able to collect another piece of land, and then he'll split the profits with that creditor. That's what we are worried about, and that's why Rav Safra says you cannot have two documents of sale on one land. And now we ask, hold on. Anytime you have a creditor and he comes and says, hey, you have to pay me, and even that guy says, I have no money, and he goes and repossesses land that had a lien on it, anytime that happens, we tear up the original loan document, right? That's it, so that he shouldn't be able to collect again. So therefore, how could he go and collect land a second time? He won't be able to, even after 3-4 years. He'll show up, says, hey, you have to pay me. Okay, where's your loan document? They already tore it up, so this ruse won't be able to work anyway. And if you say, well, it could be that they didn't rip it up for some reason. Maybe that's just talking about a case where they didn't rip it up and he still has it. That can't be, because we're about to see that they have to rip it up. Amar Rav Nachman, Kol tirfa delakati be kera'aneh l'shtarad maveh lav tirfahu. Any authorization of repossession, in other words, that creditor goes to the Bet Din and says, look, this guy, he didn't pay and he has no land, so therefore I want to repossess some property. So the court will write a document, okay, you can go and repossess the land that this guy bought because you have a prior lien. In that document, it has to say, we tore up the loan document precisely for this reason, so we can't go and try and collect it again. And if it doesn't say that, then it's not a valid authorization of repossessing. And so if the Bet Din writes it, then obviously they went through with it and they tore up the document. And not only for a document of repossession, but also other documents that are similar. And similarly, another type of document, an authorization of seizure. After they write an authorization to repossess, right, so you can go get it. And then he still has trouble getting it. So then they write a document that says you're authorized to go seize it. But when they write that document, they have to rip up the document of repossession, because he shouldn't be able to go and use that repossession document to go and seize another piece of land. So they have to rip up the prior document. And if there's a document of appraisal, before you take something, you have to appraise how much it's worth, so that then you know what you're getting, right? If you're repossessing something because of a loan that was $1,000, and now you're going to repossess something that's worth a different amount, lower amount, higher amount, so you have to know what it's worth. So that document of appraisal, whenever the Bet Din writes it, they have to also write, and we tore up the document of the authorization document, so that you shouldn't be able to use that authorization document in order to go and get another appraisal. And so whenever the Bet Din is writing a document that you can use to extract money, they're always going to tear apart the document that you brought to the court in the first place in order to get there, so you can't use it again. And the point for us is the first one, that they are always going to tear up the loan document, and therefore he won't have another loan document. So actually this cannot be the scenario that they were worried about. So we come up with a new scenario. We're talking about a case where someone comes in to recollect the property from the buyer, not because he's a creditor, but because he claims that he is the actual owner. He shows that this belonged to this is my grandfather's house and my father's house, and I inherited it. And you actually stole it. So that's what this person is coming to claim. So to review the scenario, we have a seller and a buyer. The seller had this property, and the buyer thought it was his. And so he sells it to the buyer, and the buyer has a document of sale. The buyer claims, I lost it. And he gets a second document of sale, if we would allow that to happen. And now he has two documents of sale. Then we're worried that someone will come later on and say, this was my field, you stole it. And let's say the seller doesn't even have proof that he in fact got it legally. So then that ancestor, prior owner, will be able to repossess the property. Okay, all that would be valid. But now we're worried that then the buyer will go and collude with that prior ancestor guy and say, listen, why don't you let me keep the field and just sit on it until I have a chazakah, and everybody forgets that this whole thing happened. And then you come and claim again. Now this guy can come claim again because he doesn't need a document in order to claim it. He has proof that this belonged to his ancestors. He has witnesses. He can just bring them again. And then he'll be able to recollect the land again. And since it's after a few years and everybody forgot about the first one, then that buyer will be able to produce the second deed and then go and repossess other liened property that the seller had sold to others. And then he'll be able to collect twice and then share the profits with that ancestor guy. So that's why you cannot write two documents of sale on one piece of land. אמר לרב אחא מדפתי לרבינה, ולמה ללמהמר לבעל חוב שוף לי בהי ארעה ואקום בה, תפוק לה דכיוון דנקית שתראה תריף והדר תריף. Rav Acha from Difti tells Ravina, why do I have to make such a complicated case that they're colluding, the buyer is colluding with the creditor, or the one who says it was my ancestors, and has to tell them, listen, be quiet about this and let me reestablish my possession of the land, and then we'll do it again. Since he has two deeds, why can't he just do it back to back without be colluding with that other guy? Right? He just has two deeds, so he can go to one buyer. This guy was buyer number one. The seller had other land that he sold to a couple of other people, buyer number two and buyer number three. And so since he has two deeds, he can go directly to buyer number two and say, oh, yeah, you have to give me this land because mine was repossessed. And go to buyer number three. Oh, you have to give me your land because this was repossessed. And since he has two deeds, he'll be able to do that. Why do you need the collusion and staying on the land for a few years? And the answer is, because otherwise, he's going to have too many litigants to deal with at once. He's going to show up to court. He has to make sure to go to different courts at different times. And it's too likely that he'll get caught if he does that, if he tries to repossess two pieces of land for the one piece of land that was taken away from him at the same time. So then he'll get caught. That's why he has to make this ruse and go through the motions after some time. And the guy actually comes to court again and fakely repossesses the first buyer's land again. And then, by that time, the courts, people don't remember. So it's the only way to actually get away with such a scheme. ולכתוב לה שטרה מעלייה, ולכתוב טברה למוכר, כל שטרה דיפקון על העדה פסולין, לבעל מין דיפוק בזמנה דה. And now a new question about the Tanakama. Tanakama said that you do not write a document for a new document for a loan, but you do write a new document for a sale. However, in the second document, you can't put a guarantee. And now we said, well, that's not really good because now the buyer doesn't have a guarantee. And he really deserves a guarantee. So why don't we write a good, proper bill of sale, a new one, for the buyer with a clause of a guarantee. And we will also write a receipt to the seller and give it to him. And this receipt will say, listen, we wrote a new document for this guy, so therefore any document that he produces, except for the one that we're writing on this date, we're writing a new one here, this is a replacement document, and if he tries to produce any other document from any other date, then then that's an invalid document and it can't be ignored. And then we don't have to worry if the buyer ever tries to collect twice with with his double document, with the old document, then the seller can produce his receipt and said, sorry, you were given a replacement document. We're only going to honor the new replacement document. I have a receipt that you agreed that the old document is invalid. So why don't you just do that? And that way we can write a full replacement document. Amaru harabanan kamed Rav Papa, v'amri la kamed Rav Asher, zot omeret en kotvin shovar. And so the rabbis were discussing this in front of Rav Papa or in front of Rav Asher. And they said, well, I guess we can conclude from here that we do not write receipts. This is a machloket that we're going to see on the next daf. In general, do you write receipts or not? Well, why not? Sounds like a good idea to write receipts. The reason is because you're putting undue responsibility on the other party to have to keep that receipt. So a simple case is someone has a loan document and he says, I lost the loan document. So why don't we say, okay, write a new loan document for that lender and then write a receipt to the borrower that says that there's a new loan document out there. Ignore any old loan document. So do we do that and allow the lender to then be able to collect with the new document? Should we do that? Seems like it's a nice idea. The problem is then the borrower can complain and says, I don't want to have the responsibility that I have to hold on to this receipt forever, because then if I lose it, then the other guy will produce the old document, and if I lost the receipt, I won't have proof that he cannot use it. So why should I take upon myself responsibility to have to hold on to this receipt? Otherwise, I have to pay again, just because the other guy lost his document. I don't want to have to be responsible forever to hold on to this receipt. Who could hold on to a receipt forever? And so there we have a machloket, whether we say, no, sorry, you have to hold on to the receipt because he deserves to collect his loan, or we say that you don't have to hold on to your receipt, and therefore we don't write another loan document. And if you lose the loan document as the lender, then you actually lose your ability to collect unless you go and find some other type of proof. So that is a machloket that we're going to see later on. So the rabbis who speak before Rav Papa and Rav Asher, they come and say, we can learn from here that we don't write receipts, because if you would write a receipt, as we just said, then you'd be able to write a full new document of sale with a guarantee in it, and write a receipt that the old one won't work anymore. But we don't say that. Instead, Tanakama of our original Baraita says we don't write a guarantee in the new one. So we can learn from here that we don't write a receipt. So isn't that a good inference? Papa or Rav Asher, whoever it was, said, no, this is not a good inference. It could very well be that in general, we do authorize the writing of receipts. And so that, let's say in a case of a loan, we can follow that opinion that says we do write a receipt and therefore we will write a new loan document and give the other person a receipt. In general, we would. If here we are worried that we have the same case. Seller has property, he sells it to a buyer. The buyer has a document of sale. The buyer claims he lost it, and now he has two documents of sale. What are we worried about? A creditor will come and repossess that land. And now that buyer will go separately. He'll take one document of sale, and he won't even go to the seller. He'll go directly to a second buyer and say, listen, my land was possessed. You bought yours after me. I'm taking it. And that guy doesn't have a receipt. He doesn't even know about the receipt. And then the buyer will take his other deed and go to a third buyer that was after him and say, listen, my land that I bought first was taken away. I'm taking away your land. And that third buyer also, he doesn't have a receipt. He doesn't even know about this. He doesn't even know that there was a receipt. And therefore, he'll be able to repossess both pieces of land and properly. So that's why we're worried about that. Even if you would say in general you write a receipt for a loan, that won't help here in a case of a sale. We ask about that. Sof sof lakochot lav amari dara hadari. Wait, in the end, the second and third buyer, won't they end up coming back to the seller and say, hey, our land was repossessed, and they'll try to get their money back or other land that he sold afterwards from the seller. And then the seller will say, what? This guy repossessed from both of you? He wasn't able to do that. I have a receipt. And then he'll be found out, and then they'll be able to get their land back, even if the first buyer goes and takes both of those pieces of land. Once they complain to the seller said he had no right to do that, and then he had the right to take one of them, but not the other one. And then the buyer number 3 will be able to get his land in return. So there's no problem. And so we say, yeah, but by the time they do all that and make a court date and another court date and come back to the guy, that might be a long time. Maybe it'll be a few weeks or a few months. And in the meantime, buyer number 1, the scam artist, he will be consuming its produce. And so he'll take all that produce. Oh, it was yours. Okay. And then he gives it back later. But in the meantime, buyer number 3 lost out on that produce, and therefore that's why we don't write 2 documents for the original lender, because otherwise, even if he'll get caught, we don't write 2 documents, and we don't write a receipt, because even if you write a receipt, in the meantime, till it gets sorted out, he'll be able to benefit. That's one reason. Or we can explain it in another case where buyer number 2 and buyer number 3 didn't have a guarantee to the land. And so they're not going to go back to the seller and say, oh, you have to pay us back. So again, the whole scenario is a buyer buys land from a seller. A creditor repossesses that land. And now if the buyer has 2 documents, he can go to buyer number 2 and buyer number 3, who both don't have a guarantee on their purchases. He can repossess their land, and they're not going to go back to the seller because they have nothing to complain about. They don't have a guarantee, and then they will never even know that the seller actually had a receipt that negated the old document of sale, and then he will get away with it. Okay, we ask, if you're worried about that, well, that's legitimate, then you should say the same thing regarding a promissory note. And you just said, you said, we can even explain this opinion according to the one that says we do write a receipt for a promissory note. Why don't you worry about the same thing, where you have a borrower and a lender, and so then the lender gets a document that says, all right, you owe me $1,000. And then the lender will claim, oh, I lost it. Okay, so no problem. Write him another one and write a receipt. Fine. And then what that lender can do is the lender can go and say, hey, you didn't pay me back, and he can go to buyer number one and buyer number two and repossess their land because he has two loan documents, right, for an outstanding loan. And he'll be able to go and collect one and two. And let's say they have no guarantee. And then he'll be able to collect twice for a loan, even though the borrower has a receipt, but those buyers will never know that the seller had a receipt the whole time. And so why don't we worry about that? Why does Rav Ashena and Papa say that, no, we can even explain this according to the opinion that says we do write a receipt in a case of a loan, we should worry about the same thing. And the answer is different. Hatam dezuzeh masik amri payaseh balcho bezuzeh. Usually, when someone is collecting because of a loan, right, that lender comes and says, hey, he didn't pay me back, and they're off to take your land. Those buyers say, wait a second, we want to check, right? We want to check first because usually people pay back a loan with money, with cash. So they're going to go to the seller and say, is that true? You have no cash and you didn't pay him back? He says, yeah, I had no cash. I didn't pay him back. So then they'll say, okay, what can I do? And they'll have to allow their land to be repossessed. But because it's a loan with money, they're going to check with the seller first. And if the seller has a receipt, then we'll say to the second time it goes around, they'll say, I have a receipt. He can't collect twice. Whereas in the original case, so we're talking about from writing two deeds of sale, they know if someone buys land and it gets repossessed by some creditor, and now he wants to come and get paid back, he's not going to be okay just getting money back. Someone who buys land and it gets taken away, he doesn't just want the purchase price back. He wants land, and so he's not going to be happy just taking money. He's only going to go back. He's only going to go to the next purchasers, the one who bought land after him, buyers 2 and 3, and take it. So those buyers are not going to bother checking with the seller did you pay him back? Because even if he has cash, he's not going to be okay with just getting cash. They have a right to other land, and that's why they may not even check with the seller. And since they have no guarantee, they're not going to even go to the seller to complain. And that's why, according to this theory of that Rav Asher and Rav Papa answer, it could be that Tanakama would accept that you can write a receipt, force a receipt upon that borrower, and write a new loan document for the lender. That you would accept writing a receipt in that case, but not allow writing a receipt in the case of a sale.
We now go back to the wording of the Baraita. Amar mor chutz mina acharayut shebo. According to Tanakama, we will write a second document for land, not for a loan, but yes, for land. However, in the second document for a land sale, we will say, yes, this person sold this land to that person, but we will not say that there's a guarantee on the land. That way, if the first document still exists and is used to recollect land, then the second document will not be able to also be used to recollect land. So now we ask, how do we write such a document of sale that excludes a guarantee? Amar Rav Nachman, dechatvi hachi shetara denan dela lemigbebe la mimisha'abede vela mibene hare ela ki hechi deteku mar'a bide de lo kayach. So we actually write in the document all the regular stuff. This person sold this land to that person on this date, and then it says this deed cannot be used to collect, not from liened property that was sold and not from unsold property. In other words, if at some point the land that the buyer bought is repossessed by some creditor or some claimant, then the buyer cannot use this document to then go back and get other land from the seller, not land that the seller currently has and not land that the seller had sold that there would be a lien on. Rather, the purpose of this deed is only as proof that the buyer in fact bought it. So if someone else comes and says, that's my land, you can say, no, look, here's my deed, I bought it. That's the only purpose of it. Amar Rafram, Zot omeret achrayut ta'ut sofer hu tama dechatab lehachi, halo katab lehachi gabe. Rafram says, according to this statement of Rav Nachman, that would mean that if, let's say, you didn't write anything in the document about a guarantee. You didn't say there is, and you didn't say there isn't a guarantee. You just sold this person, sold land to that person, and you didn't say anything about it. So, according to the statement we just said, we would assume that is a scribal error. If you leave it out and don't say anything at all, then we assume that there is a guarantee. How can you infer that from Rav Nachman? Because Rav Nachman is saying the only reason why there's no guarantee is because you wrote explicitly there's no guarantee. That means if you wrote nothing, then you would be able to collect. So without writing anything, we assume, the scribe just forgot about it, and that means that you can have a guarantee when you write nothing. So that would be the suggestion from Rav Nachman. However, Rav Ashi disagrees. Rav Ashi amar achrayut lav ta'ut sofer hu umay chutz me'achrayut shebo telaketi be'achrayut. Rav Ashi disagrees with Rav Nachman, and therefore also disagrees with the an inference that Rafram made. And he says that a guarantee, if you leave it out, it's not considered a scribal error. If the scribe did not write anything about a guarantee, then that means there is no guarantee. And so in that baraita, when it says we write a new document and we leave out the guarantee clause, it means that you don't write anything at all. And if you don't write anything at all, then there is no guarantee. And now we end with the story. There was a certain woman, and she appointed a messenger, a certain man, to go and buy land on her behalf. Here's some money. Go get a good deal for me and buy me some land. He goes and buys land without a guarantee. He said, that's okay, I'll just buy it, and if it gets repossessed, then we have no recourse. He agreed, the messenger agreed to such a sale. And so the woman came to Rav Nachman, and Rav Nachman said to the agent, she has a good claim. She sent you to do something for her benefit, not something to her detriment, to go and spend good money on land that might be repossessed at any point. That's to her detriment, and so you did a really bad job, right? You should only buy land with a guarantee. I mean, unless you're really speculative and you're willing to take that risk and you got a really low price, and okay, but now you're doing something on behalf of a woman. You should have known that you should only buy something with a guarantee. So therefore, Rav Nachman says, Zil zabnah mineh shelo b'achrayut v'hadar zabena nihala be'acharayut. So he says you have to go and buy it without a guarantee because you already agreed to that with the seller, and now you, the messenger, have to give the guarantee yourself. You have to sell it. You buy it yourself without a guarantee, and then you sell it to the woman with a guarantee, so that if it gets repossessed by anybody, you will have to then provide another piece of land for her. So important that if you're a messenger, to do a good job. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, hanoten matana l'chavero v'achzir lo et hashotar chazra matanato, hachamim omrim matanato kayemet. Now, according to the end of the Braita, where Rashbag says, if I give you a gift, and I give you a gift of land by giving you a document, and then you give me back the document, then the land also goes back. The document is inherently attached to the land. Whoever has the document owns the land. Hachamim, however, say, no, not true. If I give you the document, that's my means of transference of the land, but now the document is not needed anymore. And therefore, once it transfers, it's yours. And the only way to get it back would be to write a new document that says you're giving it back to me or selling it back to me. My tamad Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Amar Rabbi Rav Aseh naasa keomer lo sadeh zo netuna lecha kol zman she'ashetar biyadecha. So we said, what is the explanation for Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel? Rav Aseh explains that it's as if the person giving the gift is saying, this is yours as long as this document is in your hands. Like he's giving condition, right? This gift is yours on condition that you hold on to this document. And therefore, if the receiver gives the document back, then it's no longer his because that violates the condition. That would explain the mechanism of Rashbag. Matkif la Rabba, ihachi nignav o avad nameh. But Rabba says that doesn't make sense, because that would mean if the deed of gift is stolen or lost, then also it wouldn't be his anymore, because he said only as long as you have it in your hands. And he doesn't have it in his hands, but he didn't give it back. And surely that's not what Ashbag meant. It wouldn't mean that if I give you a gift with a deed and then you lose it, then it's not yours anymore. He was only saying only if you give it back. So that can't be the explanation. El amarava beotiot niknot b'mesira kamipalge. Rabban Shimon Gamliel sabar otiot niknot b'mesira. Rabbanan sabre en otiot niknot b'mesira. Rather, they're arguing on this topic, which is we're going to continue with on the next daf, whether letters can be acquired by passing. So here's the question. Let's say you have a loan document. Let's say I have a loan document that says some guy owes me $1,000. And let's say I want to transfer the document to you so that you can go and collect that money instead of me. So according to Rabban Shimon Gamliel, as long as I just give you the loan document, so now that responsibility to pay that he had to me is now he's responsible to pay you, right? You are the holder of the debt instead of the credit instead of me. And so just by passing it, you can transfer the meaning of a document, the contents of the responsibility and rights in the document are acquired just by giving the physical document. That's Rashbag. Rabbanan say, no, you cannot do that. If I just give you the document, all you own now is the piece of paper, but not the rights or responsibilities that are in that piece of paper. In order to transfer a loan document to you, I would actually have to write another document, and then that document that says, I am transferring to you the debt that is in, or the credit that's in this document. And so you cannot transfer letters, the meanings of the letters, just by giving it over. That's what they're arguing about. And therefore, Rabban Shimon Gamliel says, when I give you the deed for the gift, then it's yours. When you give it back, then it's mine. Whoever has the deed of the gift, right, it can be transferred. The gift itself can be transferred just by giving the deed back and forth. Whoever has the deed has the land. That makes sense. Whereas Rabbanan say, no, that doesn't work. If I give you a deed of a gift and then you want to give it back to me or to someone else, you actually would have to write another document that would be transferring the contents, the rights of that first document. And that's why, according to the Banan, if I give it to you and then you give it back to me, you still keep the gift, because you can't just transfer something with the document. The letter, you'll only be transferring the piece of paper. And if you want to transfer the contents of a document that says I'm giving this gift to you, well then you'd have to write another document giving it back to me. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.